The 14th of November 1940 is a date one city will never forget. That night, 568 people lost their lives and many more their homes. I'm standing in the centre of Coventry in a spire which is all that remains of a huge medieval cathedral destroyed during the Second World War in one devastating air raid that the perpetrators called Moonlight Sonata.
It was the spirit of our forefathers that built that grand building. I believe that that spirit is with us still and will help us to rebuild it one day when we have served and suffered a while, a little longer.
And built again it was, to rise in glory 22 years after those words were spoken. Tonight we celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the cathedral still known today as the new Coventry Cathedral. And we find out how a building conceived in the darkest days of the Second World War became an international symbol of peace and reconciliation.
Over now to Richard Dimbleby at Coventry.
There has been a Christian church dedicated to St. Michael.
50 years ago, on the 25th of May 1962, the new Cathedral of Coventry was consecrated in the presence of Her Majesty the Queen.
Open the doors!
75,000 people applied for tickets to be at the consecration because Coventry's story had caught the imagination of the whole country, in fact, the whole world.
Now you will see the bishop going in procession down the nave of the cathedral to the crossing. And at the crossing he'll trace with his staff the Greek letters already placed there in bronze, the letters Chi Rho, the first and second letters of the word Christe or Christos.
We used to go to the cathedral regularly because my father was a chorister, and we were told to stand very still and we mustn't smile or nod at Daddy because he was in the choir. And they walked down with their books in front of them, very solemn, but as he got to us, he used to wink.
On the night of the air raid, Betty was an evacuee living 25 miles away in Fenny Compton.
The whole sky was lit up. And the dear old soul that we lodged with said, ain't nobody going to be able to live in that, and went to bed. And I was 10 years old, so I obviously thought that I was an orphan. It was that bad. The next day, I did go and meet all the trains that came into Fenny Compton station. On the last train, the station master said to me, "No, my dear, they won't come now." So I walked rather dejectedly, thinking, well, I don't know quite what's going to happen. And on the way, I saw somebody with one of those little pencil torches, and there was a man's voice and a child's voice, and it was my father and our John, so I wasn't an orphan after all.
From her father, Betty learned about the devastation of Coventry.
Because my father was an assistant organist at the cathedral and also a member of the choir, a lovely bass he was, he went up to the place where there had been his organ, and there was nothing but a pile of rubble. He found a little bit of iron and picked it up and wept. Obviously, as Christians, you are taught that you don't take revenge, but I'm sure that the prevalent feeling, both in Coventry and other places, they wanted revenge.
The cities of Great Britain salute their brothers in this hour of tribulation, but not defeat. An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth.
Dick Howard was the provost of the bombed cathedral. He had a very different message from the newsreels.
What we want to tell the world is this. We are trying, hard as it may be, to banish all thoughts of revenge.
For anybody to start saying we must forgive was just so alien at that time, because everything we did, everything we thought about was how to win the war. But that was his message, and of course a lot of the peace work that the cathedral still does started with him. He was such a wonderful man.
We're going to try to make a kinder, simpler, a more Christ-childlike sort of world in the days beyond this strife.
Architect Sir Basil Spence was chosen to design the new cathedral from 200 entries in an international competition. The day of the consecration was a proud moment for Sir Basil's daughter, Gillian.
Do you think that the cathedral itself is an expression of your father's own faith?
Yes, I do think so, very strongly. I think he'd been through the war and everything, and he'd just felt that this was a time for rebuilding in every sense of the word. Rebuilding morally, spiritually.
Of course, it was replacing this wonderful medieval cathedral, and yet the design was ultra-modern. What was the reaction generally to that?
Well, it was very mixed, and the problem was what they showed first were the cathedral competition drawings. Now, these are architects' drawings, and they're very difficult to understand.
Anthony Blee was Sir Basil's assistant. He believes that one of the architect's greatest achievements was to keep all of the old cathedral ruins as part of the new design and to link them through an ancient pedestrian right-of-way.
By doing that, he almost encouraged people to enter the cathedral before they even knew they were there, because suddenly you're confronted by this great west screen in glass. Spiritually, you enter the building at that point. So that was an act of genius, I think, to do that. And the other remarkable thing was that the art is not applied afterwards as a bolt-on goodie, but an integral part of the concept of the design right from the start. And that's terribly important. John Piper's baptistry window, the nave windows, the Sutherland tapestry, the Epstein sculpture of St. Michael.
You two have another very special reason for being particularly fond of Coventry Cathedral, don't you?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do, because we were married there.
The cathedral wasn't finished.
No, the walls were half built, and it was a very cold, misty February day. And I had a lilac dress, long, which dragged across the mud and the puddles. But there was a consecrated chapel, and we thought this would be the most wonderful place to be married.